In a quiet suburb of Indianapolis, there's a Target supermarket that looks just like any other during the day. But when night falls, stories circulating among the local residents transform this place into a scene from a nightmare. According to widespread tales, years ago, an employee mysteriously disappeared after a night shift, leaving behind only a series of strange symbols graffitied in the stockroom, never explained or forgotten. The protagonist of our story is Mia, a young woman passionate about unsolved mysteries and urban legends who decides to investigate these events for a video project. One evening, armed with a video camera and flashlight, Mia sneaks into the Target after closing hours, determined to uncover the truth. As she explores the dark and silent aisles, lit only by the weak beam of her flashlight, Mia hears unexplainable noises, footsteps echoing through the empty corridors, whispers coming from the shelves, and the sudden rustling of objects seemingly moving on their own. Despite the growing fear, she continues to record, convinced that her investigation could finally yield some answers. Reaching the stockroom, she discovers the same symbol she saw in old photographs of the missing employee, still vivid on the walls. As she examines the signs, a series of paranormal events begin to unfold around her. Lights flashing without explanation, boxes falling untouched, and an oppressive atmosphere that seems to envelop her completely. In a crescendo of tension, Mia realizes she is not alone. A dark presence, perhaps the spirit of the missing employee, or something even more ancient and malevolent, begins to manifest. Sinister shadows move along the corridors, and a thin, almost whimpering voice guides her to a hidden room, where she finds a diary belonging to the missing employee. The diary reveals a tale of obsession and madness, of a dark pact made with unknown forces in exchange for the supermarket's success and prosperity. A pact that required a human sacrifice. Mia understands that the employee didn't just disappear, but was offered up in sacrifice, and now his soul was trapped, doomed to wander the supermarket. Aware of the danger, Mia tries to escape, but the dark presence attempts to stop her, manifesting more violently. At the height of despair, Mia uses the information found in the diary to break the pact, reciting an ancient liberation formula written among its pages. The moment she utters the last words, an explosion of light fills the stockroom, and the dark presence dissolves, freeing the soul of the employee who, with one last whispered thank you, disappears into the night. Mia manages to escape the supermarket, taking the diary with her as proof of her incredible discovery. The next day, she decides to share her story, accompanied by the haunting images captured that night, hoping to close a dark chapter in the history of Target. However, there is a twist. Mia is arrested. The local community remains divided between those who believe her story and those who consider her a liar. The video of her actions in the stockroom, spread by the security cameras, leaves no room for doubt for most people. It seems like she was simply staging an elaborate theft attempt, following a script seen in the past. But the confession of a cashier changes everything. Her testimony adds a level of credibility to Mia's story, forcing the authorities to reconsider the case. The cashier recounts experiencing unsettling presences and unexplainable episodes in the stockroom, similar to those described by Mia. This revelation, combined with the pressure from the online community closely following the case, leads to Mia's exoneration and the reopening of the investigation into the Target's oddities. Despite being warned to stay away from the stockroom, Mia's curiosity and desire to definitely close that part of her life push her towards the place that had nearly marked her downfall. However, her determination is put on hold when she unexpectedly receives a job offer from another Target in a different city. Mia's hiring at another supermarket in the chain raises numerous questions. Why would a company want to hire someone who had recently been at the center of such a controversial scandal? Was there someone within the organization who believed her story, or was there a darker reason behind her hiring? Mia herself is perplexed about her new position, but decides to accept it, hoping to find answers or perhaps to leave the past events behind. However, she can't ignore the suspicion that her connection with the mysterious forces was not yet concluded. Her new position might offer her access to information or resources previously drained, or it could simply drag her deeper into a mystery she had only begun to unravel. As the months pass, Mia finds herself living a seemingly normal life, but the memories of that night in the stockroom remain vivid in her mind. The unanswered questions and the unsettling feeling that there was still something to discover follow her like a shadow. Perhaps, as her instinct suggests, there was a deeper reason behind her hiring, linked to the darker forces she once faced. Only time would reveal the truth behind the mystery enveloping Mia and the Target supermarkets. But one thing was certain: her search for truth was far from over. In the heart of a quiet town in Colorado, the local Target was a cornerstone for the community. Among its crowded aisles and neatly arranged shelves, however, lay a darker mystery that would soon disturb the peace of its inhabitants. Among the supermarket's employees stood out Jake, a reserved and diligent man, known for his punctuality and commitment to work. His discreet presence and introverted demeanor did not go unnoticed, but no one could have imagined that he would become the prime suspect in a series of murders that had shaken the community. The victims, all regular customers of the Target, had been found in their apartments, with no apparent signs of forced entry or struggle. The police were at a loss for leads, until a small detail caught their attention. Each victim had made purchases at the Target within a few days before their death. Upon examining the security camera footage, investigators noticed Jake's figure, who on several occasions seemed to follow the victims with his gaze, behavior that immediately placed him under the spotlight of the investigation. The community was shocked by the news. Jake, the shy and reliable employee, a serial killer? Circumstantial evidence began to pile up, and public pressure grew immensely. Jake was suspended from work and taken into custody, while his life was dissected in search of concrete evidence linking him to the crimes. However, the truth was much more complex. Jake was innocent, a victim of circumstances and a series of unfortunate coincidences. He himself was distraught and desperate, unable to comprehend how his life had been turned upside down in an instant. His only fault had been being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The breakthrough in the case came when a detective, not entirely convinced of Jake's guilt, decided to delve deeper into the investigation, examining the security camera recordings with greater attention once more. It was then that a previously overlooked detail emerged. Another individual, a regular customer of the Target, appeared in the recordings on the days of the victim's purchases. This man, of ordinary appearance and completely unsuspecting, had always been there, in plain sight, but invisible to the eyes of the investigators, hidden behind his facade of normality. With the new lead to follow, the police intensified their investigations on this new suspect, soon discovering that behind his mask of a typical customer hid a disturbed mind, capable of planning and executing the murders with chilling coldness and precision. The purchases made at the Targets were part of his ritual, a way to select his victims and study their habits before striking. When he was finally arrested, the community breathed a sigh of relief, but the damage to Jake's reputation had already been done. The experience had changed him, leaving deep scars and a distrust toward those he once considered friends and acquaintances. His rehabilitation into the community was slow and painful. Even though he had been exonerated, the shadow of suspicion would follow him for a long time. However, Jake found a certain solace in his proven innocence and the awareness that, despite everything, the truth had prevailed. In a small town in New Mexico, a Target became famous not for its deals or excellent customer service, but for a series of events so strange and terrifying that they became an urban legend. The story began when a group of thieves, lured by the prospect of an easy heist, began to rob the supermarket's cash registers after closing hours. The first attempted robbery occurred on a moonless night. The thieves, experienced and well-equipped, managed to disable the external security cameras and open a back door without raising suspicion. However, as soon as they stepped inside, an inexplicable coldness enveloped them, bringing with it a sense of dread and terror they couldn't explain. They decided to proceed anyway, driven by the desire for profit. But what they encountered in the dark corridors of the Target stopped them in their tracks. A female figure with long hair covering her face, except for part of her mouth and face, stared at them from the end of a corridor. Her eyes, pitch as black, shone with an unnatural intensity, piercing the darkness. The thieves, paralyzed by terror, ran away at full speed, abandoning their planned heist. Convinced that they had hallucinated due to stress, they organized a second robbery a few weeks later, hoping to redeem themselves. But the story repeated itself. The same figure, with those unfathomable black eyes, awaited them, this time accompanied by a whisper that seemed to pronounce their names. The terror was such that they once again abandoned the heist, swearing never to approach that cursed place again. One of the thieves, in a state of panic and despair, turned himself into the police, telling his story while clearly in a state of psychological shock. He spoke to the woman with long hair and black eyes, confessing that the image haunted him day and night, tormenting him with the feeling of being constantly watched. He believed it was a divine punishment for his sins, and sought help, eventually being admitted to a psychiatric facility for the necessary support. The news spread quickly, fueling rumors and speculation among the residents. Some recalled unexplainable episodes experienced in the past inside the Target, such as feelings of being followed or watched, objects moving on their own, and cold breaths on their neck in the absence of drafts. The supermarket's reputation took a hard hit, with many customers choosing to avoid the place, fearing they might encounter the mysterious figure. The owners of the Target, initially convinced that their advanced security system had been the deterrent that saved the supermarket, soon had to face reality. Something unexplainable and deeply unsettling was happening. Despite attempts to reassure customers and debunk the rumors with investigations and blessings of the premises, the damage was done. The legend of the woman with long hair and eyes black as pitch became part of the local folklore, a tale whispered in dark nights and keeping potential wrongdoers and the curious at bay. Ultimately, facing the continuous loss of customers and the shadow hanging over their business, the owners decided to consider the possibility of relocating the Target to a new location, hoping to leave behind the supernatural events and start a new chapter away from the presence that had turned an ordinary supermarket into a place of terror and mystery. In an old neighborhood of Detroit, there stood a Target supermarket, on whose upper floor lived Mrs. Thompson, a middle-aged widow who had called that place home for years. Her peaceful existence was interrupted when she began to hear strange noises coming from the supermarket at night, well after closing hours. Curious and somewhat unsettled, she decided to investigate, not imagining that this choice would lead her to confront a mystery that defied all logic. One evening, armed with courage, Mrs. Thompson descended the stairs that separated her from the closed Target. As she approached, she noticed shadows moving inside, as if someone or something was wandering among the shelves in the dark. She returned home that night, her heart still pounding, but curiosity drove her to repeat the experience on subsequent evenings. Each time, the shadows were there, dancing and elusive. Finally, she decided to take the boldest step. One night, she forced the back door and sneaked inside the Target. The air was cold and stagnant, charged with an energy that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Following the sound of whispers that seemed to call her, she found herself face to face with a woman wrapped in a dark cloak, immersed in what appeared to be a black magic ritual. The woman, with eyes burning with an unnatural flame, turned towards Mrs. Thompson, revealing her face twisted in an expression of pure malevolence. With a hoarse voice, she confessed to having been a former employee of the Target, unjustly fired, in her words, and now intent on taking revenge by cursing everyone who worked in the supermarket. Before Mrs. Thompson could react, the witch fell into a trance and attacked her, screaming that she too must die. Panicked, Mrs. Thompson managed to escape, running towards the exit under the guidance of the dim light filtering through the emergency exits. The following day, still shaken by the encounter, she told everything to the Target employees, hoping for some explanation or at least a sharing of her terror. However, the reaction she received was even more disconcerting. They told her that the woman she had described had been an employee of the supermarket, yes, but she had died in a car accident years before, well before Mrs. Thompson had moved into the neighborhood. Convinced that what she had seen and experienced could only have been the apparition of a vengeful ghost, Mrs. Thompson found herself dealing with a fear so deep and inexplicable that it pushed her to make a drastic decision. 2 weeks after the event, she packed her memories and hopes into cardboard boxes and left the apartment above the Target, seeking refuge in a new home, far from the shadows and nighttime whispers. The story of Mrs. Thompson and the vengeful ghost became another piece in the mosaic of urban legends surrounding the Detroit Target, a place where the boundary between the real world and the supernatural seemed dangerously thin, capable of terrifying even the most rational minds.